Behind every finance leader is a story that you don't always hear. The pressure, the growth, the successes and failures, and the decisions that shaped how they lead today. Right here on Finance Uncut is where those stories come to life. Each week, we bring you honest, human conversations with CFOs and finance leaders across banking, technology, and beyond. Just real leadership and real insight. I'm your host, Matt High, and this is Finance Uncut by BizClick. Let's get straight into the action.
Our next guest spent a decade in investment banking, built and exited her own femtech startup, and then decided the best way to teach negotiation, risk, and decision-making was to sit everyone down at a poker table. She's the founder of Aces High, a London-based corporate experience company turning poker strategy into boardroom superpowers for some of the world's biggest organizations. So please welcome Jo Living.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, I've given you a very, very quick introduction there, but I would love to hear from you more about yourself, your journey, and Aces High as a whole.
Yeah, I'll start with Aces High. As you said, a corporate team building experience like no other that really straddles that team building fun, but bringing it back to real business value. And it's a microcosm. The poker table is a mirror of how we show up in the real world. So we're using that immersive experience with no screens to understand ourselves and our colleagues and how that can relate back from the poker table to the boardroom table. I love poker as a hobby. I'm an entrepreneur first, a poker player second. You won't find me at the top of the World Series of Poker, but I've been playing for a decade. It all started for me back in 2016. I had my decade in banking. I've subsequently had 10 years in startups, innovation and entrepreneurship. And I was on holiday with a boyfriend at the time in Morocco. And on the airport transfer, he'd clocked an advert for a large international poker tournament and wasn't letting up. I was actually pregnant at the time, and after much nagging, reluctantly rolled off my hammock and back on the bus to Agadir. I'd only been learning for about 6 months. I really was not enthusiastic for this tournament, but kept him company, took my book along, fully expecting an early exit. And I guess life deals you a hand you never saw coming, because 8 hours later at 4 a.m, I'd beaten 200 men to win my first international poker tournament.
Amazing.
From there, fell in love with it, started teaching some friends poker from my home games, which were very male dominated. So brought some women in. And I saw quite organically them reporting how the poker strategy had helped them to assert their value and communicate and negotiate everything from client deals to pay rises. And I'd seen that in my own corporate journey too, having raised venture capital funding, exited my tech company. There were a lot of parallels from poker, and that's really how Aces High was born.
So you've done so much. Tell us a little bit about your investment banking background and how the skills from the poker table actually translate perfectly.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even just pulling up a seat at the table in an environment that might not historically have been for women and leaning in to assert your value, huge parallels with that. But I think the exhaustion as well. I was doing long hours. I passed out on the trading floor 3 times. And that sort of managing your whole body, like in a poker tournament, it can go on for 8 hours or more. You're having to manage your hydration, your sugar levels, your tiredness. One mistake, one lapse in concentration, it can cost you the tournament. And so I think that's kind of like the high pressure moments and the decision making, and why poker, which has a feedback loop of about 2 minutes per hand, can bring to light and surface some of the behaviours that might not be serving you in the workplace. And it's just a kind of microcosm of a way that you can learn those feedback loops a lot quicker.
So when a lot of people mention, poker for business, you're thinking bluffing and bravado and kind of faking it, but where are they actually wrong?
Oh, absolutely. I love this question, because people think it's about bluff and bravado and boys' night, and Aces High is about smashing that. It's a game for everyone, and it's just a strategic gameplay, and we strip out any gambling and have designed it for complete beginners. But if you look at poker in popular culture, if you look at Lock, Stock, Ocean's 11, Only Fools and Horses, if you grew up in the UK in the 90s like me, all of the references of poker in popular culture are kind of groups of gangsters with cigars in smoky basements. And they're playing a game of bluff and bravado called 5-card draw. And it's literally, I've got 5 cards, you've got 5 cards, who's the stronger, who's going to bet the strongest. And that is a game of bluff. But actually, poker's evolved. It's gone over to the States and back, and come back as Texas Hold'em, which is now the most popular variant of the game. And if you look at Casino Royale in 2007, it's actually playing Texas Hold'em. So the game's evolved. And in Texas Hold'em, you only have 2 private cards and up to 5 face-up community cards. So most of the information about the hand is shared, which shifts it from a game of bluff to a game of strategy and statistics. And so that's where, the connotations of poker aren't always accurate. And I always say it's a game played by men, but it's absolutely made for women. It's about empathy, reading the room, patience, discipline, really imagining what cards others are playing, not just having an egocentric view. And it's about winning the tournament, not the hand. So you can sometimes let the small hand go. So absolutely a game for everyone. And I'm really passionate about getting all kinds of people into their first poker tournament.
So as the game has evolved then, so it's now Texas Hold'em, do you think the skills around it have evolved? Do you think people need to be more talented when they're playing poker now?
Yes, definitely. It's much less a game of luck than people think. Obviously, the turn of the cards does come into it, but there's so much strategy around it. So I talk about the brilliant basics and the magic moments. The brilliant basics are going to be the statistics. Have you got the odds to call? How much is it to see the cards? And what are your expected returns of winning? How likely are you to hit the cards you need? There's also playing positions. So being the last to act in a round of betting gives you more information. And we talk about this with our business leaders. If you're in the room in a team meeting, if you are the last person to speak, even if you're the senior leader, you're going to get those crucial insights, the innovation and the ideas from junior team members. But if you speak first, you risk everyone going along with you. And that's very much like an early all-in with a strong hand. You may win the hand, but you're never going to build the pot to its full potential. So we love to talk about that. But the skills are kind of patience, discipline, statistics, knowing how to time your contribution, bet sizing. They're the brilliant basics. And then the magic moments can be intuition, reading the room, following people's patterns, looking at their stress responses. And you can layer those on at sort of opportune moments.
That's actually a fantastic analogy. And I think something really important for people to learn, that if they talk first, they drain the creativity from the room almost.
Yes, the acronym I've come across is the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. So the HIPPO in the room should speak last. The highest paid person's opinion should come last, so that you invite that creativity and ideation from other team members.
That's a brilliant, brilliant acronym. So when was the aha moment? When did you sit down at a poker table and think, actually, this is a masterclass in business negotiation?
It was a slow burn. So I had lots of personal aha moments, and that's the beauty of our Aces High workshops. It's a mirror, so everyone's taking something different from it. One person might be saying, I realize that I'm too risk averse and I don't put myself in opportunities, for promotion or for this. Someone else will say, I realize I'm dominating the conversation and I'm the aggressor and raising too frequently. So I had a few of those moments where I had brought it back to business, but it was a slow burn. And it was when I was teaching the beginner women's poker nights and they reported to me. I was in a client negotiation and I realized I had aces and there was no way I was folding. And using these poker analogies, or even just I folded on doing the dishwasher and now that's it, he's going to do the dishwasher. And it was making them actually assert their value, know their boundaries, and really kind of understand their strengths. And my friend in particular, Caroline, she came back from mat leave. She wanted to go down to 4 days a week. The company had said, no, we have to come back full time. But she knew her value. She knew how integral she was to various deals, even after her mat leave. And she said, that's it, then I can't come back. And they folded and she came back for 4 days a week. So real examples of where people had lent in and asserted their value and pulled up a seat at the table.
So let's bring this to our finance audience then. So finance professionals are generally, the most risk averse people in the room. So what can poker teach them about dealing with decisions when they're actually kind of uncertain about them themselves?
That's so brilliant, because we're now in a world of making decisions with imperfect information. And you mentioned there finance managers being the most risk averse types oftentimes. I think it's about reframing risk. So often in the workplace, I do understand risk sometimes needs to be eliminated, transferred, minimized, but not always. If you're not at least sometimes going out on a branch, you're not going to get the best fruit. So how can you reframe risk as an opportunity? Not that you're going to go all in every hand, but nor should you be folding every hand, because you're never going to build the pot or win the pot and build your chips to its full potential. So it's about understanding expected returns. Not will I win this hand, definitely, but if I played this hand 100 times, would I be up more than I'm down? So if you're 8 out of 10 characteristics for a job application, you don't know you're going to get that job, but you've got to put yourself in the arena for that promotion or whatever to say, well, I might not get it this time, but if it's on point, the expected returns are there. Don't waste your time, resources, energy applying for a job where you've got 2 out of 10 of the attributes. And it's the same in business. You think, okay, I don't know if we're going to win this deal, but the expected returns justifies the risk, and reframing that not as kind of completely lost or missed or a waste of time, but we didn't get it that time, but if we played the hand 100 times, we'd be up more than we'd be down.
We'll get it next time, yeah. So another major thing, I guess, is businesses don't necessarily know when to walk away. So why is it so difficult for someone to fold in business, and why do we struggle so much with that decision?
To do with loss aversion. So once you've already kind of reined an emotional bias, so if you are invested in, whether it's an investment, say, and it's not performing, do you lock in your losses and walk away? And sometimes this is what we teach. Minimizing losses in poker and protecting your chips is as important as maximizing gains. But if you feel invested, the temptation is to double down or to go deeper into a deal that's not performing. And so disaggregating the emotion from the decision making, the ego and the outcome from what the statistics are telling you, and being able to look objectively. So I think having sort of discipline, understanding where your emotional ego is influencing you, particularly when it comes to a stress response, and so that you're able to walk away and have that discipline and stick to your strategy, and again come back to those brilliant basics. You said you were going to exit at this point. Can you execute in line with the strategy?
So let's move from ego then to something that is commonly misrepresented as ego, and that is actually assertiveness. So when you're working with people on assertiveness and negotiation, what does that mean when you're taking the skills from the poker table to the boardroom?
I think it means different things for different people. I think we do a psychometric profiling within to give you your poker personality at an ACES High workshop, and we have jackals, elephants, and mice, and everything in between. The jackal might already, it's about understanding your default responses and recognizing where you are. One is not better than the other, but you do need to raise awareness around your characteristics, not so that you can be the opposite, but so that you can be the strategic chameleon. Can you dial up a different side of yourself when it's demanded? So it's fine to be a jackal. I know that I'm quite alpha, but knowing that shadow side, it can also get me in trouble. If I'm backed into a corner, I will come out fighting. And that can mean going all in with a weak hand, not because it's the right decision, but because it feels like taking control. So I think shining a light on that kind of default persona, and then practicing operating from a different place. So when should I hang back more? When can I do more listening? And likewise, conversely, for a mouse, it's absolutely fine and good to be attentive and risk aware, and the person that's the backbone of decision make cautiousness and decision making. But when can you lean into that assertive side of yourself, and knowing being able to be that strategic chameleon and knowing kind of the nuance in between?
In the fast-moving world of global finance, information is your most valuable currency and your best friend. Finance Chief gives you the ultimate digital briefing for finance leaders. From deep dive reports and interviews with successful leaders, crucial daily insights on the stories and information that matters, white papers and research, and, of course, podcasts. Why not move from just following the news to mastering the trends, reshaping the C-suite, and gain a competitive advantage for you and your business? Visit financechief.com to read our digital magazine, sign up to our newsletters and subscription content, and listen to more exclusive podcasts. Join us today and be part of our fast-growing community. We'll see you there.
And do you find then when people find out what animal they are or what level of assertiveness they are. They actually are able to adapt to their surroundings, and they're able to change that.
Yeah, we're looking at we rank people on attitude to risk, conflict, and decision making, and they're able to see that in a 2-minute hand, right? And I've been quite shocked, honestly, how often it's the women that are less able to assert themselves. I didn't think it would play out as strongly as it has, where I'm getting asked, what's the minimum bet? Yes, I might have the best hand, but I only want to bet 1 chip into a pot of 100, so it's about bet sizing. It's not going to scare anyone off. It's not going to build the pot. And so you're able to see that and just ask them a couple of questions. How is this showing up for you? And more often than not, they're saying, yes, I'm not getting my voice heard in meetings. And so there's an aha moment there. It's an immersive experience. It's really fun, but it's also sticky and memorable. We're in the middle between team building fun and business value. We're not the negotiation training with all these kind of hard 5 outcomes, but it really is personalized, and you're getting a kind of microcosm holding up a mirror to your behaviors. So people get a lot of different aha moments.
Fantastic. So another poker term then, I guess, is the poker face that we all know and love. The business equivalent of that is probably the timely pause. So tell me more about what that is.
Yeah, people say all the time, oh, I'd be terrible at poker. I don't have a poker face. And I actually don't think you need one. I'm very expressive. I don't think I have a brilliant poker face. There are ways you can mask, your tells and your executive presence. So your table persona, as you sit down, everyone's reading you. And I will manage that as I go into a casino. I might, pretend it's my first time there, act like I'm just there with my boyfriend, even play recklessly the first few hands, deliberately sacrificing a few chips to give the impression that I'm a novice. And those first impressions count. And then I will tighten my play, play more aggressively, and they don't see it coming. So I think you can manage your table persona without having a poker face, but you can be quite conscious. It's called Hollywooding in poker, or managing your table persona just like you would your executive presence. But the power of the pause is particularly impactful. I think owning the pace, owning the conversation, deliberately slowing things down, particularly when we are in a stress response, you're more likely to have that amygdala hijack, that fight, flight, or freeze, which pertains very closely to raise, fold, or call. You almost see it directly. If you're alpha, you'll be raising. If you're timid, you'll be folding, and that's your fight, flight, or freeze coming out. And so actually just buying yourself some time, counting to 10, having a long exhale, trying to self-regulate so that you can set the pace and reset yourself and manage any stress response that's coming.
Obviously, in business, you won't be able to play recklessly your first few hands. You have to, always keep an eye on that budget. So what would be your advice to someone who panics in negotiation situations and needs more of that kind of poker calmness that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think you still can manage your table persona, right? It's fake it till you make it kind of, or power dress, or how do you want, and being more conscious about how you wish to be perceived. And for some people that will be dialing up a kind of authority level, but for others it might be, being more of a team player or however. So I think just being awareness is really the first step to understanding how you're perceived, and then taking the next step to manage that. But in terms of, being in a situation where you're having a stress response, your prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's responsible for reason, logic, decision making, discerning, and that's more important than ever in a world of AI, where we can do the data-driven decisions with like computers, right? But we're going to need to layer on those magic moments of intuition and judgment and discernment. And so it's very important that when you're in a fight or flight space, what's happening is your kind of amygdala, your reptilian brain, is taking over so that you can knee-jerk your response. And that's shutting down your prefrontal cortex for all of that reason, logic, decision-making skills, and it's giving you kind of these fight or flight responses. So to get back online, it's common talk now around kind of really long exhales. There's things you can do around box breathing, which is kind of in for 4, hold the in breath for 4, breathe out for 4, hold the out breath for 4, that will just send signals to your parasympathetic nervous system, so your rest, nest, and digest, as opposed to fight, flight, or freeze, to switch back online. So breath is a good one, pausing in general, noticing three things that you can see, feeling the sensation of three things. It could be your shirt or the chair or the floor, just to bring yourself back in the body, and three things you can hear. So three things you can see, three things you can feel, and three things you can hear. That brings you back into your body and notices your attention, and really just land back in the room. But again, with a poker tournament, you're going to stay hydrated, you're going to manage your sugar levels, you're going to make sure you've slept the night before, and it's all the same for a big presentation or a big board negotiation.
Absolutely. The yogis have had it right for years. They've done the, I don't know what it's called, Ashana. I think it's the Ashana breath for years and years. And now I think the business world is catching on to it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love all that yoga and meditation and wellness. And it's something I invest in, a lot of self-care to make sure that you can perform at your best, whether that's poker table or boardroom table.
So obviously we're talking about the kind of natural instinct to freeze or run away in negotiations. What would you say is the most common mistake that finance leaders make when they know that the stakes are actually just really high?
I think they know what they want to get out of a negotiation and lead with that. And I think it's egocentric thinking is the biggest mistake made by finance leaders when they're going into a high stakes moment. These are my cards and this is how I'm going to play them. The first thing you should do is be stepping out of egocentric thinking and imagining what cards your opponent is playing. That's a better way. So yes, you can play your kings, but have you considered that they might have aces? You might know your boundaries or your hard stops or in a negotiation, but what do they need to get out of it? So I think really dialing up the empathy, which isn't normally a word people associate with poker, but is actually one of the most powerful tools to put yourself in their position. Again, I think if it's a kind of very traditional negotiation, try to negotiate on two different aspects, not so much relevant for poker, but if you can, I don't know, it's a client and they want to negotiate on price, can you also negotiate on, the package or the timing or the delivery? So having two different variables can be really powerful. So, okay, I can give you that, but I'm going to do it over this time frame, or we're going to do it in this way. And so I think, that can be having a couple of different levers to pull. But really the biggest mistake is going in with what they want and not pausing to listen. Speaking first does anchor a negotiation, particularly if it's a numbers-based one. So if you're in poker and you're setting the stake or the bet, that is going to kind of set the tone. So if you really feel strongly, for example, buying a house, you might want to anchor the negotiation by going in early. But in situations where it's not kind of hard numbers, oftentimes it's best to go last, let them speak, do that listening, and understand the parameters before you assert your position.
So let's move from negotiation then into the role of finance in the boardroom in general. So obviously finance is seen as a department that kind of slows everything down. It scrutinizes, it restricts, and it just makes life a little bit more difficult for the rest of the company who love to spend money. As a CFO or a finance leader, how do you shift your mindset from being that gatekeeper to being actually a commercial partner?
I think oftentimes when we look at negotiation, we think of a Trump style, right? I win, you lose. I'm going to make this so uncomfortable for you that you're going to give me what I want. More often in a workplace setting, it's a negotiation is much more commonly we all want the best outcome for the company, but we're all playing different hands. So we're all coming at this with different information. Of course, the marketing department's going to want to spend the money, and the sales team's promised something undeliverable to the client, and then the tech team's still working out the bugs, and then the finance team's trying to manage budgets and rein in costs. And so you all want the best outcome, the best thing for the client and the company, but you're all playing different cards. And so kind of coming at that from this is a conversation, and poker is a conversation. It's not always I bet you fold. It's I think I'm winning. Here's a bet. It's kind of a question. No, I think I'm winning, and now I'm going to bet over you. And so making sure there's this sort of dynamic of listening and of feedback and of evaluating your position and re-evaluating your position in light of new information. And I think people go into a a team setting with a position and then fail to reevaluate. Now you can go in with kings, that's brilliant, that's a brilliant starting hand, but if an ace comes down on the board, you now no longer know if you're ahead, because someone could very easily have a pair of aces. So you need to reevaluate that in the context of what this new information has come to light. So staying nimble, staying light-footed, doing that listening, speaking last, I think can really help in a team setting, and making sure that all ideas are coming to the table. And we actually do a exercise in our Aces High workshops where we ask people to play poker collaboratively, which sounds nuts. And it's exactly that. You're trying to communicate through the medium of betting chips and folding cards to agree who at the table has the best hand. So you're successful as a team if the person with the best hand wins. And that is folding your kings when someone else has aces. You must assert your value, but can you fold when someone's got a better idea? And that's the way, as a team, you can surface the bigger priorities, stay nimble, and make sure you're listening as well as asserting your value when it counts.
That's actually incredibly interesting, and I think requires a level of modesty that maybe some executives may lack.
Absolutely. We see that all the time where they're unable to fold their kings when someone else is betting at them and they have aces, even though it's pretty likely, given the board, what the opponent has. And conversely, we also see people completely unable to assert their value. So it's on them. If you're a junior with a good idea, it's on you to bring that to the table. Or maybe you're in a risk department and you have some information which is like, this is really risky. And at that time, you need to know when to really assert your value. So it's picking your battles, I think, for the finance team. It's not about winning every single hand. It's about winning the tournament. So how do you play the long game? So, okay, maybe I'm going to let this one go. But when we're really hitting a red line, or we're up against budgets, or the risk is at an uncomfortable level, then I need to kind of really assert my value. So it's nuancing between what's a nice to have and what's the must win.
Absolutely. So when a finance leader is sitting in the office of the CEO, what do they usually get wrong when they're communicating the numbers to them, and how do we fix that?
I think it's about, again, stepping outside of yourself to imagine how they like to be communicated with and how they're going to play, and following people's patterns. So time your moment, right? So if someone's already having a stressful day, is that the time you want to walk into their office, or do you want to reschedule? Have you kind of understood their levers and what's important to them? Yes, you can come with the statistics and the numbers. That's your brilliant basics, but maybe their language is more kind of visionary, especially if it's CEO, ideas led. How can you kind of get on the train with them and be the yes person while still maintaining your boundaries? So I think, it's there's no one size fits all, right? But it's the biggest tip is, again, moving out of egocentric thinking, not just what you want to get, but communicating in their style as well, watching for their stress responses. So a lot of poker is body language as well. You can baseline where people are at, so their behaviors. If they are taking 10 seconds to act on every hand and all of a sudden they're betting in 2 seconds, that's a deviation from their pattern, which can give you some information. Blink rate is a really easy one, because you can look at people's eyes. If you can try and baseline someone's blink rate and that goes up, that is a classic stress response. However, word of caution, you can't know if someone's having a stress response because they've got aces or because they're bluffing. There is no tell for lying, but there is a tell for stress responses. So following people's patterns, watching when they're out of sorts, timing your contribution, bet sizing, so how hard are you going to go on this, and trying to understand their needs and boundaries, and when they're feeling weak, and when you've got position, when you're the last to act and actually maybe you do have the upper hand, but not seeing everything as this win-lose negotiation, but how do we get to the best outcomes for the benefit of the company, or for the overall longer play of the tournament, of the long game.
So a lot of it is actually psychological. It's understanding other people's personalities and I guess what animal they are.
It's not a card game played by humans, it's a human game played with cards. So it's absolutely about reading your opponent, Again, it's not a strategy in itself. It's sort of the magic moments on top of the brilliant basics. So always statistics, patience, discipline first, but empathy, intuition, reading the room, playing position, absolutely are those magic moments to layer on top. And it is a people game, and you learn so much about yourself. And it's why I'm so passionate about making sure that people see it as a game for everyone. It's not just for boys' night. It's not just about gambling. We've stripped out all the gambling, and you can still take the strategic gameplay and extract the benefits for lessons in life and work.
So we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask you just one more question. And that is, can you give our listeners a practical framework that they could apply tomorrow for maintaining composure and thinking clearly when a conversation gets tense?
I think there is always a exit button, right? You can always fold. You don't need to be in every hand. So you can always come back to the conversation. And if that's that power of the pause, whether it's a very big pause, like I'd like to pick this up again later, or just finding 10 seconds to reset, doing one long out breath and feeling your feet on the floor. Like that would be come back into your body. It's those basic things about kind of being in the moment and resetting. So if you just do one long out breath and that's all you can remember to do, that is my biggest recommendation. And you can do that at the poker table, at the boardroom table, and just kind of revisit and also prepare early. Try to go into those situations knowing what your boundaries are, knowing what you want to get out of it, imagining what the other people want to get out of it, so you're prepared ahead of time. And the more I play poker with people I know, and I know their traits, and you're not coming in cold, that could be really powerful. So yeah, try to reset with one long breath out, and just do what you can do. But I think there's no magic wand. It's always stressful. I still get into kind of fight, flight or freeze moments, but I think building awareness around your tendencies to kind of be aggressive or back into a corner, so that you can counter those default stress responses and dial up a different side of yourself when it's needed.
Brilliant. Well, Jo, you have been a wonderful guest on Finance Chief Uncut. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been amazing. So yeah, come and join us anytime.
You must come to one of our taster events. We do them once a quarter. So do come along to the next one.
Oh, absolutely. I will do. Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much, Jo.
Well, that's it for this episode of Finance Uncut, where finance leadership comes alive. If you liked what you heard, you can hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. And remember, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you want more insights between episodes, and why would you not, you can always head over to financechief.com or join the conversation on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. Thanks so much for joining us, and until next time, this is Finance Uncut by BizClick.